You've had an amazing success story with Bridgewater. You started the company in your kitchen, I believe. 40 years ago, you built it into the most successful hedge fund in the world. When you started, how did you learn to invest? And how did your investment strategy change over time?
Well, I learned from my mistakes.
So Dalio made Bridgewater in his kitchen. Most I've done in my kitchen is make eggs. But we're not here to talk about AK's cooking skills. We're gonna talk about how Ray Dalio created his winning investment strategy and how you can use the same principles to help create yours. So like he said in that clip, the first and most important thing to do is to learn from your mistakes.
Well, I learned from my mistakes. In other words, my instinct is, you go there and you place a bet. I've had winners and I've had losers. And what I did, every time I made a mistake, they became painful mistakes, but with time, I realized that reflecting on those mistakes would give me gems. What I would do is I'd say, why did I make that mistake? And I would learn from that mistake. And I'd write down a rule. So what was helpful for me is I put that rule, I wrote these principles down.
It was just trial and error. He would place a trade in the market and then analyze how it played out. And while most traders focus on their winners, Dalio was more focused on his losers, because it was from the losers or his mistakes that he could pull out market principles. And the more principles he could understand from analyzing those mistakes, the closer he got to creating a profitable trading strategy. And that's why I'm always talking about how important it is to have a trading journal. Because if you're gonna analyze your mistakes like Dalio, then you need to have all your trading written down somewhere. I'm talking making notes before you put the trade on, as you put it on, and then also post-mortem notes. And I talked about all of this in the trade journal video, which if you haven't seen, I'll link to it above. But yeah, if you want to pull those same gems that Dalio did from analyzing his mistakes, then you need to do the same to your mistakes as well. But Dalio also didn't stop at just listing his principles. He took it a step further.
Those principles that I wrote down, I then put into algorithms, in other words, equations. And what I learned by being able to do that is if I took my decision criteria, those principles, and then I tested them back through time, I gained a perspective that was fantastic. I could test them in back 100 years. I could test them in different countries, and I would learn how those rules worked.
See, he didn't just have a fuzzy list of rules that he put together. He spent a lot of time to actually define them, because only if you really understand the principles can you make them into a defined set of rules that can actually be tested. To be coded into a computer, it has to be specific. And the testing portion of this is really important, because if you don't test those rules, then really they're just assumptions, because you have no idea how robust they are. Do they only work in some type of market environments? Do they work in every market environment? Is this a rule that's going to withstand the test of time, or is it just going to fall apart in the next cycle? And that's why you heard Dalio talking about testing his rules in multiple different countries going back 100 years. Now that's a lot of testing, but it showed him which principles he could use and which he should throw away. And that's really how building a system works. You get a hunch from observing the market, and then you go and test that hunch. If you're not going to back test your assumption, then you're not going to know if it's real and usable or not. Now, one argument that more inexperienced people have when it comes to systems is, why even start with an assumption in the first place? Why not just backtest the data and see what pops out? Well, the problem with that is that you're gonna get data mined strategies that don't work off any real market principle. Like if you were testing data and for some reason you found a correlation between the full moon and Netflix's price going up, would you actually use that to build a strategy? There's no real market principle that defines that relationship. It's just data mining. And that's why starting with your own observations with what you think is a grounded market principle is the best way to go. And then you go and backtest that assumption to see if it's true or not. But through this whole process of analyzing his mistakes, pulling principles, and loading them into a computer, Dalio was able to create something neither he or the computer could do by themselves.
And by putting all those rules together and then having these algorithms, the computer could replicate my thinking, but it could actually think better than I could, because what it would do is it could process more information, it could process it faster, and it could process it less emotionally. So it was like having a GPS that was next to me while I was also making my decisions, like you're driving in a car and you have both operating. And to have that next to me was, invaluable. It would learn, I would learn, and together we built that.
See, Dalio is well aware of the advantages that a computer has over him. For example, it processes data much faster and it executes on rules with no emotion involved. And he knew working together by combining his knowledge with that computer would give him overall better results. And I completely agree with that, which is why I've become a systems trader over time. I started out discretionary, but as I learned more about what I was doing, I was able to codify it. Now, creating a system or an algorithm doesn't have to be super complicated. I know we hear about genetic algorithms and all this complex quantum computing going on, but what we're doing can be a lot simpler. It's simply defining rules and plugging it into a computer. So for me, when I'm using a system, the market principle I'm trying to exploit is momentum. So in basic terms, all that is having a computer run a regression on a bunch of stocks to see which ones are trending the hardest. And then you invest in those and take advantage of the market principle of momentum, which has been around forever. Now, momentum is not that complicated, but Dalio, who's much smarter than all of us, was able to do the same type of thing for global macro. Now, when I think of global macro, I think discretion. Because how can you predict geopolitical events like wars and dictators taking over and all the crazy stuff that's happened in history? But Dalio, using the process he just explained, was somehow able to pull out the core principles of what makes the world turn. And that's why he has billions of dollars and runs the most successful hedge fund of all time. And Bridgewater claims that their system, which is 99.9% systematic, I think there's only a few cases where Dalio will actually go in and make a decision against what the computer is saying, but they claim that their system can run untouched for the next 100 years, and it will make the same type of crazy returns that it does now. Now that's amazing. Now you don't gotta get that complicated, but your goal should be to find your own market principles that you wanna exploit in your strategy. Now right now I'm working with my partners to release to you guys the momentum system that we use. But it's funny because even once you have a system that does bring you returns, you can still screw it up. And that's because it takes a lot of psychological training to actually even follow the system. That's the #1 failure point I see with all traders, including myself in the beginning. It gets tough out there. So the first thing we're doing is building psychology courses and guides to help investors eventually use that system. And that's all coming soon. So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit that bell so you get notifications of new videos. And of course, I'll keep you guys up to date with how that progress is going and all that stuff. So subscribe and I'll see you in the next video. Stay fallible out there. Bye.